Good morning and welcome to the M&E for Peace community and welcome to this week's edition of the M&E Thursday Talks. The M&E Thursday Talks on M&E for Peace are made possible with the support of the Carnegie Corporation of New York through the Peace Building Evaluation Consortium. Just in case you've forgotten, my name is Jack Farrell and I am the M&E for Peace Project Manager at Search for Common Ground based in Washington, DC. Today, I am absolutely delighted to welcome Scarlett Kassimatis of Peace Direct and anyway Mutetwa of Envision to host the M&E Thursday Talks to lead a discussion on conflict transformation in Zimbabwe, lessons from Envision and Peace Direct. A note about our format for those of you who are new to the Thursday Talks: once Anyway and Scarlett have finished their presentation, we'll jump right into a question and answer session. You can ask your questions in advance of the discussion portion by submitting them through the question function on GoToWebinar throughout the presentation. I'm now going to hand it over to today's host to get us underway. Anyway, and Scarlett, you are very welcome and the floor is all yours.
Thanks, Jack. Hi, everyone. I'm Scarlett Kassimatis from Peace Direct. I'm the Monitoring, Evaluation and Learning Advisor, and I'm going to be presenting with Anyway on the lessons from the conflict transformation in Zimbabwe project. Peace Direct has worked in partnership with Envision for 9 years since its formation, and we have a partnership based on locally led programming which responds to local contextual needs. We've accompanied Envision over the years, acting as critical friend to support them to strategically develop their work. We believe that our model of accompaniment is key to enabling those from and in the context to be the principal protagonists in efforts to resolve conflict. And that's why, whenever possible, we'll be presenting lessons alongside partners from now on. We'll start with a short introduction to the organization and how it was formed, the project itself, and then a few key points on the context and groups involved. We'll then move on to the lessons and impact, where we really want to highlight the most interesting and important things that came out of the journey so far. So anyway, if you want to start off, thanks.
Thanks, Scarlett. Hi, everyone. My name is Mutetwa, and I'm the director of Envision Zimbabwe Women's Trust. Envision Zimbabwe Women's Trust is a women's organization that uses conflict transformation as a tool for development and to advance women's rights in Zimbabwe. Founded in 2009 by a group of women, all coming from different backgrounds, including the academic field, civil service, former political activists, Envision Zimbabwe started implementing the conflict transformation project in Murewa district, which is in Mashonaland East province, and in Hurungwe district, which is in Mashonaland West province of Zimbabwe. While the primary target and beneficiaries of Envision Zimbabwe's interventions are women and girls, the organization also works with men and boys as well as key leadership structures at community level to mobilize for the promotion and protection of women's rights. So the aim of the project was to use conflict transformation as a tool to ending the culture of violence against women and girls as well as the wider community, allowing the community to come up with its own solutions, identifying the capacities that are in the community already, and utilizing these to create sustainable change.
So the project context was particularly difficult, and the project particularly ambitious in its aim of gender-sensitive, community-led conflict transformation, working directly with those in positions of power to achieve this goal. Zimbabwe has experienced a cycle of violence since independence, mostly triggered by elections and the leadership's response to this. The security sector and traditional leadership played a significant role in the perpetration of violence, and a holistic response was desperately needed.
So the nature of the conflict in Zimbabwe post-year 2000 informed who the various target groups and beneficiaries of our interventions were going to be. Top on the list was the security sector, and in particular the police and the role they played and continue to play in the Zimbabwe conflict. The Zimbabwe Republic Police has been implicated in the widespread human rights violations over the years. We have also realized that the police, if reformed, could play a crucial role in violence prevention as well as the protection of women's rights. Being a difficult, inaccessible institution, that the police are, Envision relied on its vast social capital and networks to gain trust and confidence with this key institution. Envision invested a lot of time and relied extensively on the vast networks of the board of trustees of the organization to build relations with the Zimbabwe Republic Police. As a result, Envision Zimbabwe is one of the very few, if not the only organization currently working directly with the Zimbabwe Republic Police. Since 2011, Envision Zimbabwe has been implementing the Zimbabwe Republic Police Conflict Transformation Training course, in which over 1,000 police officers have been trained. Given the vulnerable position of women and girls in Zimbabwe, in the Zimbabwe society, as well as the fact that women have been the most affected by the cycles and episodes of violence in Zimbabwe over the years, women and girls are the primary target of our intervention. Envision Zimbabwe, from the onset, recognized the existing gender power dynamics that place the men over women, as well as the role patriarchy plays in the Zimbabwe society. Instead of working with women and girls in isolation, Envision's approach and strategy was to be inclusive, winning over men and boys, not only to change their attitudes and behavior towards women and girls, but more importantly, to rope them to actively participate in the advancement of women's rights and empowerment. Our position is that women's movement needs to win over as many men as possible to realize gender equality. Our experience has been that if you exclude men, empowering women and girls alone might in fact trigger conflicts, both at household level and within the community at large. If we are to achieve gender equality, gender justice, and a more sustainable way of protecting women's rights, then men must be equally capacitated for them to willingly give up the power they have, as well as to negotiate for equality with their female counterparts at community level. Envision Zimbabwe also identified traditional chiefs as a key institution when it comes to development, peace building, and the protection and promotion of women's rights, especially in rural Zimbabwe. Traditional leaders are considered the custodians of culture and tradition. They are also the gatekeepers to the communities, and no project may be implemented without authorization from traditional leaders. Given the negative role the traditional leaders have played over the years, as well as the power they have at community level, traditional leaders are a key target group, and Envision Zimbabwe has been implementing a conflict transformation traditional leaders project in both Hurungwe and the Muretwa districts.
Thanks anyway. So as you can imagine, there are some really key lessons from this process that are useful for international and national actors. We'll just cover a few on approach, M&E funding and participation. And of course, anyway, I'm sure we'll be happy to answer questions about these, as he could talk a lot longer on each point. So thank you anyway.
So one of the lessons we learned as an organization was around evaluating the impact of our work. We learned that you can still measure change even though you started off without a baseline. The project that we're implementing, or that we've been implementing over the last 9 years, started organically and we didn't have a baseline. But this was not the end of the world for us. We learned that there were monitoring and evaluation tools out there that we could use to assess the transformation that had occurred attributable to our work. Because we were so embedded in the community and having worked with beneficiaries of our project for so long, it was easy for the organization to collect data using storytelling, change stories, the most significant change, focus group discussions, and interviews. We were able to gather a lot of qualitative data that we analyzed and were able to get an idea of the impact our work was having. The second lesson that we learned was on some of the peace building and conflict prevention mechanisms that we established at community level. One such mechanism is the peace committee. These are the peace committees that we established. Peace committees were established for monitoring and preventing conflict at community level. The membership of these peace committees um, is selected by the community itself and is trained by Envision Zimbabwe. Peace committees are the first port of call for conflict mitigation at community level, and the membership has been trained in mediation, negotiation, and other traditional conflict resolution techniques and skills. The membership functions on a voluntary basis, and the key lesson that we have learned from this is that because we are using volunteers who are based in the community, this is cost effective and sustainable to build the capacity of communities to resolve their own conflicts. The third lesson that we learned is around issues to do with transparency and its importance if you are working in restricted political operating environment. Over the years, an adversarial relationship has developed between government and human rights NGOs in Zimbabwe, with most non-governmental organizations being suspected of working to effect regime change in the country. As a result, there's a lot of mistrust and suspicion between the government and NGOs, to the extent that some NGOs have been banned from operating in certain communities. Envision Zimbabwe has learned that there is need for continuous engagement with authorities and to be as transparent as possible so that there's no suspicion or mistrust in terms of the organization's goals and objectives. This ensures that the organization continue to have access to communities and beneficiaries without government interference. The fourth lesson is around the use and identification of strategic entry points for the project. Recognizing the restrictive operating environment, particularly for human rights and peace-building organizations in Zimbabwe, as well as the controversies created around human rights work in the country, Envision Zimbabwe's position was that we needed a strategy of gaining trust and confidence of all stakeholders, including government, in terms of what we wanted to achieve. One such strategy was that we initially focused on less controversial but important rights before moving into the controversial ones, such as the civil and political rights. For example, we engaged communities on economic, social, and cultural rights. This involved talking about rights such as access to clean water, health, shelter, and so on. This strategy gave us time to build trust and confidence within the community to a point where the community itself initiated the need for us to address civil and political rights. This in turn allowed the community to lead, therefore contributing to the sustainability of the project. An additional strategy we used to increase the urgency of the community was to identify, then support and strengthen already existing traditional conflict resolution mechanisms at community level. We have learned that in most cases, communities already have solutions to their problems, and sometimes they just need support to making use of these solutions. Local conflict mechanisms are usually more acceptable to the community and therefore more sustainable to maintain in the long run. The fifth and final lesson that we learned is around funding or operating with limited funding. The funding has been dry for the Envision Zimbabwe, and we had to rely on small grants over the past 9 years. And over the past 9 years, we have used less than £500,000. This meant that we had to be adaptive and be innovative in order to achieve our goals as an organization, even though we had this limited funding. For example, we have had to rely on volunteers who are community-based, and this volunteer-led approach to our programming means that locals are empowered to work for themselves, further improving self-reliance, which goes to the sustainability of the project. We have also been careful not to spread ourselves too thin. We always try to keep it small and focused. We have been running this project for 9 years and only started to see real impact 5 years in. This is a significant lesson for funders that financial support needs to be long-term, adaptive, and not reliant on quick results.
Thank you very much anyway. I will just quickly run through the impact and then I'll move on to questions. So to summarize quickly, the impacts, the ones around sustainability and growth are that the program was actually so embedded in existing community structures and demonstrated such impact that leaders of neighbouring communities approached Envision themselves to expand the project into their communities, which more than doubled the number of leaders trained, and activities can continue wholly without Envision support beyond that. Impacts around accountability are that before the project, people were attending decision-making meetings and public gatherings out of fear of recrimination rather than a genuine belief in change. But now there is a real relationship between leaders and the people, which brings hope and empowerment. And this improved access to those in positions of power has meant leaders have become increasingly accountable, not to their superiors or funders, but to the people they serve. With regards to violence reduction, relations are not only improved here, but also between the police and the traditional leaders, where improved coordination has meant better responses to violent conflict at community level, helping to reduce violence. It was noticed before the project that leaders would never have accepted help in violence reduction, especially from outsiders, whereas now they are visibly and proudly at the forefront of efforts to reduce violence in their constituencies. In fact, changes in behaviour around violence and conflict among community members due to the internalisation of conflict transformation skills has been a significant success of the project. So reduction in violence was a major goal of this, and it's been achieved in the beneficiary communities in the following ways. More open discussion between all sections of society on the causes of violence and of alternative conflict resolution mechanisms, a reduction in crime and domestic violence, and less cases of conflict recorded to the chief courts. In fact, it was reported by community members, by anecdotal evidence in localities that Envision worked, that there was no political violence during the 2013 elections, unlike in 2008, before the project began, whereas in neighbouring control wards there still was. So that's significant success, I would say. So thank you very much. Sorry it's a bit rushed, and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you, Scarlett. Thank you anyway. I see the questions are already coming in thick and fast. Before we enter into the Q&A, just a reminder for those of you who are a bit late to the webinar, or if you're new to the Thursday Talks, you can ask a question one of two ways. The first way you can submit a question is through the question function on your GoToWebinar dashboard, which will allow you to type your question. The second is to click on the little hand icon, which will raise your hand and allow us to unmute your microphone so you can ask your question live. Just note, these talks are recorded and posted on DME for Peace, so those who are not able to join us at this time can go back and listen to the presentation, the discussion, and learn from everyone's wider participation. So I believe our first question here comes from indeed Richard Tanto, who has asked, I want to know from you whether the efforts of Envision Zimbabwe are recognized and promoted by government or in conflict to government approaches to conflict resolution. If there is a conflict in approach with government, how sustainable is the important work you are doing in Zimbabwe?
Anyway, you're right to answer that one.
Yes, I can answer that. I think one of the approaches that we've taken is that the government itself is a stakeholder in peace building. So when we were introducing the project to the community, we involved government structures such as the district administrators, the councillors of the area that we are working in, are involved in our project. And as a result, all the work that we've been doing is more like complementing the government efforts in ensuring that there's peace in the communities that we work in. Our position is that as long as there is violence, then no developmental processes can take place at community level, and the government realizes this and have always given us access to the communities to continue our work.
Great, thank you very much anyway for your detailed answer. Thank you, Richard, for your question and joining today's webinar. Our next question comes from Laura Gagliardone, and Laura writes, thank you for the interesting and clear presentation. My questions are, first, how do you communicate the evaluation findings and recommendations to make sure that they are accepted by the communities and then implemented? And secondly, what are the values you share with the local police, integrity, co-funding to work effectively with communities? Anyway, Scarlett, anyone want to jump on?
I think anyway is probably a better place to answer that.
I'll start off with the values, whether we share any values with the police. So when we started engaging the police, one of the issues that we emphasized was that the police itself is responsible. They are the duty bearers when it comes to violence prevention or taking action as and when violence erupts at community level. So when we started engaging them, we made it clear that we were not going to create anything new. We're just going to complement what the police are supposed to be doing as the duty bearers when it comes to violence prevention at community level. So at that level, our interest as an organization coincided with the interests of the police, such that they found it easier for them to come on board and work with us. And then in terms of communicating the evaluation with beneficiaries, the monitoring and evaluation process that we have as an organization has always been participatory. So when we go to the community and we are collecting data, we often, explain ourselves. We explain why we have to share stories around change. We share with them why we are conducting focus group discussions, and also the importance of us finding out whether the work that we are doing is making any difference to them. So from the onset, the community and beneficiaries, they are on board in terms of what the project, what the objectives of the project and what we have to achieve, and how we measure our successes or failures.
And I will add on to that, actually, that from Peace Direct side, I think that really trying to embed M&E in our work and with our partners as well is always a work in progress, and that actually bringing the learnings from the evaluations back to the communities is a really, really key thing that we need to, that I think probably every organization needs to do better. So that's why I'm here, and that's something that I think isn't done very well actually across the board, and yeah, so it's something that needs to be done much better.
Great, thank you guys. I just want to actually develop on this idea a bit more, and it's that idea of communicating results both to beneficiaries and to program staff to make sure that they're seeing what works, what doesn't, and why in a given context, in a given situation, or with connections to a methodology. And Scarlett, this is a question for Peace Direct, because I know you guys do some really interesting learning briefs connected to evaluations, which essentially breaks a 70-page evaluation into a 4-page document. And I was wondering if you could just elaborate on sort of why you guys do that, and sort of how what impacts are you seeing of producing learning summaries versus the traditional long form evaluation?
Absolutely, yes. So yeah, with regards to sharing the learnings, actually, among partners and within the sector, we produce these currently after each evaluation, but it brings in the learnings from across the project from both Peace Direct and the partner. Anything that's been sort of discussed throughout the project cycle, and we try and summarize that in a concise way that highlights what we've done wrong as well as what we've done right. And I think that's the really key thing with the learning summaries, is that it doesn't shy away from saying what's gone wrong and what needs to change. But we will be producing a lot more of those and sharing those really widely. And I think since I've been in post, one of the most significant impacts of these actually has been the process of developing them. If you have someone dedicated to that, then the process of developing them, just as an internalizing mechanism, really helps to embed those lessons in the next project design. And it's obviously not perfect, and it's probably about timing partly, but if you can, if it's timed well, and if you are confident in the lessons that should affect some changes, then there's a great learning process as well. I'd say that's the main impact I've seen so far, but there'll be more.
Yeah, I think sort of what you guys are doing is really interesting, because one of the issues that I see across NGOs in various sectors is that increased utilization of results, and having someone dedicated to distilling what works, what didn't, and why, breaking evaluation, monitoring and evaluation down to its fundamental parts, instead of the jargon-filled documents that often are produced, is really great, and I applaud you guys, and I encourage every other organization to do that, as well as embrace failure. Learning happens, good or bad. Being able to build off that is really important for the peace building field in particular, to move forward and understand what effectiveness looks like. Our next question actually comes from Dilshan Anuraj of World Vision, and Dilshan asks, was there any room for reconciliation?
Dilshan, is that between the perpetrators of violence in the communities? I assume that's what she means.
Yes, I think that's what Dilshan means.
Anyway.
Thank you, Scarlett. I think one of the effects of the 2008 post-election violence that gripped Zimbabwe was the divisions along political lines within communities. So, you know, one of our goals and objectives when we started this project was that we needed to reconnect these divided communities. So we have held numerous dialogue engagement meetings between members of different political groups at community level, and I must say, over the last 9 years, communities have come to talk about what happened, the violence that happened, and also agreeing that this should never happen again. And this message of reconciliation has reverberated, I think, throughout all the other communities, in those that we are not working in. And also, this has also equally been helped by what happened in 2013 when we have those elections. Both, the government and political parties all were preaching the need to reconcile and to have peaceful elections. And I must say, I think to some extent, or to a greater extent, communities have reconciled and they are ready to move on.
Great. Thank you for your detailed answer anyway. Our next question, I'm going to try and unmute one of the members of the audience, and this comes from Serge Eric Yakujian. And Serge is currently a participant and mentor on the DME for Peace Global Mentorship Program, the Peace Project. And Serge, your microphone is now live.
Yeah, okay, thanks so much, Jack, for this opportunity. Thank you, Jack, and thank you guys for these wonderful presentations. I think what you share is not far from what we did in DRC Congo and Madagascar as well with Care International. But in that case was to look at the way we can support the return back of internal displaced population who moved to Burundi and Rwanda at that time. They were running a civil war. But based on what you shared, same of lesson, but I wonder how sustainable the change you find in Zimbabwe, because as we know, community development or community-based organizations can also support a key transformation for peace, but there should be a strong link between those local-based organizations with local authority and move ahead with the governments. Why? Because by this we know that government have this route to support, let's say, long-term peace issue in the countries. So from your case in with this project, how do you see the change? You know, the sustainability of the change with this project. Do you think that could be stay for long times, or it was some kind of preliminary change, whatever the length of the project? Was total. Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks, Serge. Yeah, on the sustainability of the change, again, anyway, obviously, anyway's the expert here.
Thank you, Scarlett. I think in terms of sustainability of the change, I've mentioned during the presentation that as an organization, we have always tried, you know, to identify local or already existing mechanisms, you know, that are used to prevent conflict or violence at community level. So from identifying these traditional mechanisms that are already existing, we tried to strengthen those without introducing new conflict resolution methods that might be considered alien by the community that we are working with. So this has really helped in terms of enabling the project itself to be sustainable, because the communities are already familiar with some of these mechanisms. They feel much closer to them, they own them, and as a result, they are more likely to continue, you know, using those traditional violence prevention mechanisms. In addition to this, when we got to the community, we took the role of a facilitator. So we are only there to facilitate, to build the capacities of the communities to resolve their own conflicts. And because of that, the community itself feels like they have the capacity to resolve their own problems. They have the solutions to deal with their own conflicts, to the extent that we feel confident that even in the absence of Envision Zimbabwe, if we were to wind up the project and move out of this project area, we are very confident that the communities will continue to be self-reliant, and they will continue to have enough capacity to resolve the conflicts.
And I would also add that actually, I think that sustainability element is also kind of born from the relationships that are built between the different sections in society, you know, through the peace committees, but also there's really key relationships between police and civil society and traditional leaders that makes that internalizing of the conflict transformation much more long lasting and much more sustainable. So I think that that's a really important element of the project that really made it quite impactful.
Great, thank you guys. And thank you, Serge, for asking your question live. The next question comes from Joan Marshall-Vizier, and Joan works at the American Friends Service Committee, and Joan asks, can you provide examples of outcome level indicators that you find most useful and relevant?
Oh, I would have to, I would, because I wasn't actually a part of this project. I started when it finished, but I think that's something I would have to get back to her on and really have a good think about it.
No problem. We'll include the questions, because there are so many of them today, in the discussion page on the recording of this webinar on the DB Freeze Media Gallery. The next question comes from Matt Michels. Matt said, thank you so much for this presentation. It's really interesting. How do you ensure that volunteers do everything they say that they will? We've had issues with people being pulled in different directions and not completing tasks along agreed timelines, which delays others' work too. How do you build the commitment level, and how do you and your partners respond when there are implementation setbacks?
That's a very interesting question. Anyway, on the commitment of the volunteers, I think that the volunteers are in the community, so I think it's a slightly different. But anyway, we'll elaborate on that.
So all the volunteers that we work with, we had really to invest in a lot of training for them, because these volunteers are not only responsible for actually driving the project, but they also serve as the eyes and ears of Envision Zimbabwe at community level. So when we introduced the project, we sat down with the community. We highlighted to them that we wanted dedicated individuals that were willing to work for the community, to sacrifice their time and effort for the community for no pay. So from the onset, these people were made aware that they were not going to get any money from what we were going to do. It was going to be about their love for the work, the love for peace, the love for the protection of women and girls at community level. So from the onset, I must say that I don't know whether we are lucky as an organization. We got a group of individuals that are so dedicated, and because of all the training that we invested in capacitating these individuals to be able to do the work, we have had very high levels of commitment from them over the years, and they are so happy with the work that they've done, to the extent that some of them, we have done exchange visits, taking them to other communities where we have never worked before, and they have shared their story, what they've managed to do, and the benefits that they've realized as a community from the volunteer work that they have been doing.
That is a fantastic answer anyway, and thank you very much. Our next question comes from Bob Berg of the Alliance for Peace Building, and a great friend of DME for Peace. Bob says, thank you for this inspiring report. Do the evaluation reports or results make it possible to make a case to train the military in Zimbabwe by you or others to help them to reform as the police appears to be doing? That is, do your evaluation results have an intended spread effect?
I think that it's quite context specific, and I think that it demonstrates the impact from a 9-year project and a very organically grown organization and project that was born from needs that were then sort of responded to. And I definitely wouldn't be comfortable in saying that they demonstrated that that case really, but I think that there are things to definitely be taken out of the way Envision has worked with the police and the kind of conditions that were around for them, and the way that they are similar to other contexts, definitely, especially with regards to having that social capital that Anyway talks about, the diverse board and having that access. The transparency is a really important element, but again, the military and the police are very different bodies. Yeah.
Great. And anyway, I don't know if you have anything to add there.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that so when we actually started the security sector reform project, we started off with the military. So we had a few military representatives that were involved in the initial consultation processes that we carried out, and we found our ideas and what we wanted to accomplish found traction with the police more so rather than the military. So the military is quite different in the way it operates, and we would need more, I think, for us to be able to access the military. However, there is ongoing discussions within the board of trustees of Envision Zimbabwe in terms of how we can start engaging the military. It's a very sensitive topic and area, given what happened last year in November, and also the role of the military in the political developments in the country. So it's something that we are always keeping track of as an organization, and we'll see in future whether this might be possible. We don't know what will happen this year. We are going to have elections, and if the new administration that comes in after those elections is open, to engaging civil society organizations around security sector reform, then Envision Zimbabwe obviously will have an opportunity to engage the military.
Great, that is fantastic. And as you can see, we have hit our time limit today. So a big thank you to Scarlett and Anyway for hosting this incredible discussion. I must say I am incredibly impressed by the amount of questions that the DME for Peace audience asked, and I'll be able to share those with you guys later, so you can maybe connect on the DME for Peace comment section and really make sure that we continue to learn from this discussion. I also just want to remind people that the recording of this webinar will be made available on the DME for Peace Media Gallery later this afternoon. Just a couple of housekeeping notes before we log off today. Are you based in Europe? Are you attending the Stockholm Forum on Peace and Development in a couple of weeks? Well, come say hello to DME for Peace. We are going to be there. We're going to have a booth. We're going to be discussing sort of this quest for shared learning through the DME for Peace project, as well as the sort of monitoring and evaluation of media for peace building programming. So if you're in the Stockholm area, please feel free to get in touch. And the last thing I want to say is that next week we'll be back with another Thursday Talk. This Thursday Talk will be focused on the use of blockchain technology for development programming. I'm sure everyone on today's webinar has heard of Bitcoin, and I'm sure you're pretty curious on how you'll be able to use that technology to improve your programming. And we're excited to have a couple of experts join us next week. And you'll have more information about that in your inbox in the not too distant future. Once again, thank you Anyway, thank you Scarlett, and thank you to the DME for Peace community for another fantastic webinar. Have a great rest of your week. Talk to you soon.